Okay, so let's start this morning's webinar, Sales Ledger, Utilities, Ledger Setup, and we're going to have a little look at the ledger settings. Okie dokie, so we have these tabs available to us on our Sales Ledger settings screen. Our Options tab allows us to make copy statements for head offices, to allow batch processing, generating customer numbers, do we want to use additional transaction analysis, and do we want to enable card processing. Now this morning we're going to look at what each of those options do and how they process within the system. So we'll look at head office statements, we'll look at batch processing. I'm really not going to change the setting for generate customer numbers, that's self-explanatory. In our example we don't generate customer numbers, we manually type that in, but if you were to tick that option on, it would just increment from this particular number that you would type in here, just increment one at a time as you create new customers. Additional transaction analysis, that's an additional analysis that you can set up for all your nominal postings from each of the modules, and we'll have a little look at how that works. Enable card processing enables you to take Sage Pay payments via Sage 200. So you would need to have Sage Pay set up, you would need merchant account details, but we could set that up for you. Our customer defaults tab, we can set up default settlement discount days, discount percentage, account history, and we will be looking as well at settlement discount, how that feeds through to both your sales orders and your sales transactions. Account history, what we're doing here is determining how long we want to keep transactions for on our sales ledger accounts. So we've got set here to keep transactions for 24 calendar months. What that means is that all transactions will stay in our current file for 24 calendar months. At a point in time that we choose as a user to archive transactions, Sage will then archive those transactions that are fully allocated and are more than 24 months old, and it just moves them into a separate archive file. So we still don't lose sight of those transactions. They're just moved to an archive file that we can see through a transaction inquiry screen, and then at a point in time again that we choose as a user, there's another option to actually remove those archive transactions completely from the Sage system. This button here to archive transactions after this period, I don't know why anybody wouldn't switch that on. You know, if you could check your settings just to make sure that you are archiving transactions. Otherwise, after 24 months, when we ran the archive transactions, they would actually drop from view completely. We have the maximum number of transactions to display. So by default, it's going to show us 100 transactions, and it's only going to show us the outstanding transactions. Now, this is just a default. So when we go into our screen inquiry, we will only see the top 100 or the latest 100 outstanding transactions. But within the screen inquiry, we can change that so we can see all transactions that are either outstanding or fully allocated. We also have some other settings here, the waiting period for the recovery of VAT on bad debts, that's usually set to about 3 months, your default VAT code for sales transactions, and our default terms agreed. Now this is basically just a pop-up screen that will happen. If that is not switched on for your customer account, then every time you try to transact with that account, you get a pop-up message that says default terms have not been agreed for this account. So it can be a little irritating, which is why by default most people have that switched on, but they'll also switch it off manually for any where default terms are not agreed. We also have our aging tab, so we have a number of periods that we want to age our debt over. The most common number of periods tends to be 4 periods over our 30, 60, 90 and 120 days, but that can be set to 3, 4, 5, 6 periods, or however you want to analyse your aged debt. The default payment terms for your customer accounts are set by yourselves, so any number of days, and that can be either calendar monthly, from the start of month, end of month, or from the document date. So in our example here, we're setting our default payment terms to 30 days from the document date, which means when we enter an invoice for a customer, the due date will be dated 30 days from the invoice date. Now this can be changed on an account by account basis. It can't be changed on an invoice by invoice basis. So if you have an account that's on 30-day terms, but you have raised one invoice that you want to be, say, 7 days, you would need to change the terms for that particular account, raise your invoice for it to automatically calculate the due date at that point, and then go and change your terms back to your 30 days. And finally, we have our processing tab. So we've got foreign currency revaluation available to us. what transactions do we want to show on our statement, either everything, just those that are outstanding, or those that are outstanding plus a specific date range that we type in, and how do we want to age those transactions purely on our statements, either using the transaction date, the due date, or the ledger period. We'll be having a little look at statements as well in just a moment with the head office as well, so that'll become a little clearer during the course of the morning. Now you can also set up finance charges. So this is where you can charge interest on late payments to your customers. You also can charge compound interest on finance charges. So in other words, it'll charge interest on the interest that you're charging your customers for late payment. And again, we're going to have a little look at that, at how that is processed through the system in just a moment. Okay, so let's go through those settings and run through some examples of how they actually feed through to the processing within the sales ledger. So if we go to an account, so if I go to my Abbey Retail account, and if I go to the Credit tab, this is where we determine if this customer is going to be eligible for finance charges. Are we going to charge this specific customer a finance charge rate? You can set up numerous finance charge rates, so you just determine which rate is relevant for this particular customer by selecting from the drop-down list of available charge rates. So in this example, this customer is going to be charged 2% for late payments. If you are using your finance charges, at the end of each month within period end routines, you would run the finance charges option. Okay, and there's a number of options available to you. So first of all, we're going to apply our finance charges. You can reverse the finance charges. So if you apply a finance charge, send that to your customer, they may complain. And so what you can do is come back into this and reverse the finance charges if you decide that's the process that you want to follow. You can change the date to appear on the invoice. So by default, it's the end of the current period that we have open within our sales ledger, but you can change that to whichever date you want the transaction to be appearing at. And you want to include invoices with a due date up to, and again, by default, that's the end of our current period. We are still in 2016 in our accounts at the moment. We're in the demo data, but you can change that to be whatever date you want to. Okay. You can choose all transactions by a date range or a customer date range. So I'm actually going to change that to 17. This is a good start. I don't know why it's not showing me any transactions. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. I will just check that we have transactions on this account. I was running through this yesterday and it worked perfectly. So you can tell we're running live data. What I might do is just put on a new transaction because maybe I've already processed those. So if I just pop an invoice on to this dated the 1st of the 1st, 15, and give it an invoice number of 123 for a value of £100. Okay, what we're seeing here now, which is something I was going to show you a little later on, is that settlement discount that we set by default is pulled through to this particular transaction. It can be overwritten for every transaction, whether it's a sales order or a sales invoice that you're entering directly onto that customer account. It is just a default that's being pulled through. So with this example, I'm just going to remove that so we get true figures. A nominal analysis is pulling through, so we can save that. So yes, I'm going to continue. Close that and refresh my screen. So let's try again running my finance charges. Okay, for all transactions up to the 31st of the 12th, 17. All transactions. Oh. And it's not running. Okay. What that will do, and I will show you one that I prepared earlier. If I go to my inquiries. Okay, and show all my transactions. Okie for the 31st of the 1st. Okay, it would generate a finance charge invoice that would be sent out to your customer for each of the invoices that meet that particular criteria. So you can see here that we've run our finance charge to the end of January 2016. It's generated a finance charge transaction, and it would have generated an invoice to go out to your customer. There's also that reverse finance charge option that I showed you, and that would generate a credit note relating to each of those finance charges that you choose to reverse, and a credit note that can go out to your customer. So that way we can actually sort of hopefully force our customer's hand when it comes to paying their bill. Now also what we wanted to look at is the show outstanding only. So by default, when we were looking at the settings, we had show outstanding only, and we had just to show the 100 most recent transactions, but by unticking those options or changing the maximum number of transactions to display, we can get the full picture of all transactions for that particular customer. Okie dokie, so let's have a little look at one of the other settings that we were looking at, and that's head office statements. So what we have available to us, if I go to an account, so have a little look at Abbey Retail, and if we go to documents, this is where we determine the kind of accounts that this customer is. From our head office statement, with that option ticked on within our settings, we have 5 options available to us. Is this customer an independent office? Is it a head office? Is it a branch of a head office? If it's an independent, do we want to send a statement or not? So we can be determining who is actually going to get statements from us when we do our statement run at the end of each month. And also it may be a head office, but do we want to send a statement to that head office or not? In this example, Abbey Retail is just an independent business, so it's not related to a head office, and it's not a subsidiary of a head office either. The statement production that we're using is the email option for this particular customer. Let's have a little look at Better Kitchens. So I'm going to amend that customer, go to the documents, and you can see here that this is a head office account. If you notice, it's greyed out. The reason it's greyed out is that I have a subsidiary that's linked to this particular head office. So I can't change the status of this unless I unlink the subsidiaries. And you can also see that this customer is also using the email standard layout. Let's have a little look at Cook's Cookers. And again, if we go to the documents, you can see that this time that this is a branch. Okay, so we need to associate a head office with this customer. The head office that's associated is our BET01, our Better Kitchens, and we do have the option of do we actually want to send a statement to this customer. So we know that this branch, are they going to get a statement or not? So in this example, we're going to send a statement both to the branch and to the head office. So let's run our statements. So within credit control and statements, I'm just going to select run. I'm going to be selective, and I'm going to just choose those 3 accounts that we looked at, so you can see the processing for each of those types of account. And okay, so it takes a little while. It's going to read through all our customers, see if they meet the criteria that we've set. And it's going to produce a number of options, a number of reports. Out of those 3 customers we selected, some of them are going to have their statement sent via email by selecting that email document. So it's telling us that it has sent the report to email. However, it's also produced a paper statement. And if you notice at the top here, it's telling us that this is a branch copy. So Cook's Cookers are getting their own statement. They are a branch of Better Kitchens, but we said we wanted to send them a statement, so we have the paper copy that we can send out to Cook's Cookers. We also have a standard layout. So we have Better Kitchens, okay, which is the head office for Cook's Cookers. So Better Kitchens are going to get a copy of Cook's Cookers statement via paper layout, because that's the layout that Cook's Cookers have got set up. So you can mix and match all the different layout settings for your head office and your branch customers. If we go to our email, you'll see here, okay, that we've got 2 emails that have been generated. We've got this statement, which I'm going to open, which is for Abbey Retail. So that was just an independent customer, so they get the independent layout, there's the email layout purely to Abbey Retail. And if we go and have a little look at our other email that was generated, okay, this email, okay, is for Better Kitchens, and this is their own statement as their own customer. It's not related to Cooks Cookers. It's purely the statement for them as their own account, regardless of the fact that they're a head office. It's just their transactions for their account. So lots of different options there, and you can mix and match between your independents, your head offices, your branch, whether they're email or paper layouts, all dependent on that setting and how you actually sort of assign that to your individual customers. Okay, so let's have a little look at what else was available to us. We had an option there, do we want to allow batch processing? Now batch processing, by ticking that option, purely gives you access to a new menu option when you enter your transactions. So within Enter Transactions, we have these two options, Batched Transactions and Batched Transactions Manager. If that setting wasn't set within our utilities, if I tried to go into one of these, it would tell me the option was not enabled. So let's go into Batched Transactions. What we can do here is actually assign bulk transactions in one go. So let's suppose we're opening our post first thing in the morning and we've received a number of checks that we're going to pay into our bank account. What we want to do is just check that we're entering the right figures before we update our sales ledger module and our bank account with those transactions. So we just say we're going to add a new batch. We give the batch a title. So we'll call it checks received. The batch type, we could put in receipts, invoices, credit notes, invoice opening balances, or credit note opening balances. But for this example, we're going to enter receipts. What we do is we just type in the number of checks that we're paying in, the number of entries that are going to be on this particular batch. So just for speed, I'm going to say we're entering 2 items. And we would manually add up the value of those transactions that we're going to enter onto the system. I'm going to say it's £200. Okay, so we've said that we're going to enter a batch of 2 receipts totaling £200. So what we do now is just enter the details of those transactions. So this is just like entering any other receipt within Sage 200, the Sales Ledger module. We select the bank account that we're making the payment into. We select the customer account that we've received the money from, enter the date, we enter the reference, we enter the value, and we save that transaction. We enter our next check value, enter the reference, enter the value. And then we save. Now if you notice, the only thing with this is you can't save and allocate at this point in time. So if you use this process, you would then have to go back into the customer account and allocate the receipt against the relevant invoices that they're paying. So I'll just save that and close. Okay, so we said we were going to enter 2 transactions totaling £200, but we can see that we've actually entered 2 transactions totaling £300. Now this could be for a number of reasons. It could be that we just added it up incorrectly in the first place, or it could be that we've entered one of those transactions incorrectly when we were entering the details. If I try to commit that batch to the sales ledger, and I say yes, it's telling me now that the batch total entered does not match the actual batch total, and it won't let me update the ledger until I resolve that issue. So I could add them up again. And if I'd made the error on my adding up, I could just change that here. Or I can run through the transactions, identify the incorrect entry, and edit that to the correct value. And now, because the actual figures agree to my expected figures, I can now commit that batch to the sales ledger. So that's why it won't let us allocate that invoice at this point in time. It's because it's given us the option to go in and amend that figure. So if it's fully allocated, we then don't have the option to amend anything. Now we have 2 options, like I say, the batched transactions and batched transactions manager. Batch transactions are only available to the user that entered those particular batches. So when I go into batch transactions, I don't have to commit at this point in time. I can add all the details, close this screen, come back in, edit, add new transactions, but I will only see the batches that I have entered as an individual. If, however, I have access to the Batch Transactions Manager, I would see all the batches that all users have entered. So this would be controlled via menu access. Okay, so that's our batch processing. Okay, the additional transactional analysis option that was on our utilities, now that's just switched on or off through Accounting System Manager, and then for each module we identify if it's going to be available. So we could switch on additional transactional analysis but decide it's only going to be available for sales ledger and not for the purchase ledger, or vice versa. Now what this means is that whenever we enter a transaction, so if I again go onto a manual invoice onto a customer account, okay, for £300, just pop in a reference. In my nominal and VAT analysis, within the nominal analysis, I have a drop-down option. Now I've named my analysis marketing campaign, but you have full control and you can name that whatever you want. So it doesn't tend to be used very often, but it's a very high level form of analysis. So in my example, I'm using it for marketing campaigns to see maybe the income that's being generated from specific campaigns. Or I've also known people use it as a very high level sort of project management, so job costing. So you can set up different jobs from your drop-down list and say, is this income related to job 1? Is it expense related to job 2? And from there you get a very sort of transaction analysis of your job costing. So I can select, in my example here, a marketing campaign, and I can save that transaction. Okay. Now the only way you have visibility of those transactions is through the nominal ledger. And within the nominal reports, you can do a transaction listing report. Okay, and this is where you can say, I want to list all my nominal transactions where my marketing campaign or my job costing is whatever that I'm wanting to analyze. So it will just give you a list of nominal transactions relating to that particular analysis. Okay, so those are the options that are available to us through our sales ledger. I go back to the ledger settings. Okay, so that shows you how that works within the system. But if I, sorry, in the wrong place, sorry, if I bend underneath here. But we do have an option as well, it's called ledger trading periods. Now, you should all be familiar with the fact that you set up your accounting periods, and to be honest, 99% of people, their accounting periods tend to be the last day of the calendar month. Some people may set it to the last Friday of the calendar month, but that tends to be the norm. You can have your accounting periods set to perhaps every 4 weeks, and so you have 13 accounting periods in any one point in any year. What this option allows you to do is to have different trading periods in your sales ledger as opposed to your nominal ledger. It has no effect on your nominal postings whatsoever. This setting is purely used for your trading report within the sales ledger. So in my example here, okay, for 2009, it's set to the last calendar day of each month. If, however, I go down to 2017, you'll see that what I've done is I've actually set different trading periods for this year. I have 13 trading periods within 2017, and I've set those as every 4 weeks, because what I'm saying is I want to analyze my customer spending on a 4-week basis, even though my accounts are going to be done on a calendar month basis. Every transaction then that we enter through the sales ledger will be put into a sales ledger trading period. And within our sales ledger reports and account analysis, we have our trading report detailed. And this is where that data is selected, or where it's reported on rather. If I run this report now, it's showing me all of my customers and what they spent this year, last year, future, and then my trading periods based on my sales ledger trading periods, not on my accounting periods. So it can have some use. As I say, it depends on how you want to analyze your sales ledger trading, even though it won't affect your nominal postings and your accounting periods and your management accounts at all. Okay, let's close that. We also have the option to set up document messages. And if I go into my document messages, you can set up any number of messages. If I just edit this one, you just give that message a description. You determine which layouts it's going to be used for, either the statements or the letters, or both statements and letters. You just type in your message lines. So I've got one here, please note our Christmas opening hours. Line 2 giving the actual hours that are opening. You can also determine where the message is going to be displayed. So you can omit the message for accounts where the account balance is less than an entered value, or where the credit limit is greater than an entered value. So let's go back to our reports and run our statement. Okay, I'm just going to select a single account. So I'm going to select our Cook's Cookers. Okay, so it's going to run our statements as it would do as normal. Oh, I forgot to select. I forgot to select the message. Bear with me. Close that. Back in here. Right, sorry. So in our statements, I want to run the statements for a specific customer. So again, for our Cook's Cookers. And at the bottom here, I do apologize, statement message, you select which message you want to print out for your statements on this particular run. So we've only got the one message in this example, so I say OK to that. It will just run our statements. And then depending on the layout and where you choose to display the statement message, just wait for it to run through. Okay, it will show the message on that particular location on your statements, or your letters if it's relevant to your letter printing. Okay. We also have analysis codes. Now, what we find is that when people are first having a system implemented, we can't sort of think of a reason to set up analysis codes. At that point in time, there's no reason to sort of set them up. However, as the business grows and changes, and as you get more familiar with the system, it's something that you can come back to. So you can set up analysis codes, and all of your reports within the sales ledger can then be reported based on the analysis code that you have set up. So we've got quite a few analysis codes for our sales ledgers. We've got account manager, customer type, discount band, how did you hear about us, region, sales region, and certificate of conformity. All your analysis codes are originally set up within Accounting System Manager, and then you just determine, okay, which of those analysis codes are relevant for your sales ledger. If I were to just select any account and go to my trading tab, this is where then you can select from the drop-down list of options the value for your particular sales accounts. And then, as I say, all your reports, so maybe you want to give all of your account managers a copy of the debtors report purely for the accounts they are supposed to be managing. So in your sales ledger age debtors report, we've got customer account manager. We can select whoever we want to run this report for. And now we're only getting our aged debtors report for Susan May's account. So we can email that to her so she can call her customers and chase up some money. Okay, there's two more things that I just want to show you in today's session. There's nothing to do with settings. It's just two options that I just think are really useful and people can sort of not be aware of. First of all, if I go to view an account, I think we're all familiar with the fact that you can set up memos for your accounts just by going to the Memo tab and adding memos. You can then see a full history of memos on that particular account. You can make those memos active or inactive, but people have full visibility of any conversations that you've had with your customers. If I drill down to the transaction inquiry, however, you can set memos against individual transactions. If you look at this particular transaction, you can see that there is the letter A in the memo column, and that's telling me that there's an active memo for that particular transaction. All we need to do is to drill down to the memo on that particular transaction, and we will see the text that's been entered for that particular transaction. So in this example, I can see that there's a query regarding the quality for this particular invoice. So as well as having your memos for the accounts, it's really useful to sort of go into a little more detail and set up your memos for individual transactions. Once that issue's been resolved, again, you have the option either to set it as inactive, and that changes then the display to an I on that transaction screen. So again, users can still see that there was a memo on there and they can have a little look at the transaction, the memo history. Or you can choose to delete it completely, in which case it disappears from view and people can carry on processing as usual. So just something to be aware of with regard to your memos as well as on your accounts. You can set your memos on individual transactions. Now the other option that I wanted to show you is this option here, write off small amounts. I really like this part of your year-end processing just to tidy up your accounts. We all end up with like penny balances on transactions where, you know, customers have paid a penny too much or a penny too little, and they just sit there forever. So what this allows us to do is to sort of look at all of those transactions and choose at the end of the year, like, let's have a little tidy up and get rid of all those tiny amounts. You can choose to write off transactions from a single account, or you can write off transactions from all accounts. You choose the maximum value of the transaction that you're wanting to look at. So if you just wanted to look maybe at £1, I don't think I've got anything for £1, okay, you would just put in the maximum value and it would only show those transactions. So let's have a little look at something more meaningful. There you go, I've gone for £10, okay. So this is showing us all the transactions that have just got a value of £10 or less. This is asking us just to confirm the nominal code for our VAT write-offs, and it's defaulted to our VAT output account. We can highlight the transactions that we're wanting to write off. Okay, so this is from Festival Homes, so FES 001, 3rd of the 9th, 15. Okay. So if you had a long list of items there, you can be specific about the ones that you're wanting to write off by selecting or unselecting individual transactions. It shows you the total value that will be written off in this particular process. And when you're happy with the selection that you've made, you just select the write-off button. If we now go and have a little look at the transactions for that particular account, okay. And if I go down to the 3rd of the 9th, 15, 3rd of the 9th, 15, okay, there's our invoice for £9.02, which has been fully allocated against the credit note for £9.02, which has just been generated using that's write-off small amounts transaction routine. So again, it's just a nice housekeeping routine that you can run at the end of the year, just to have a little tidy up of the data within the system. Okay. So just to summarize, if I go back into our utilities and the ledger setup, within the ledger settings, we can see now what we mean by the copy statements for head office, batch processing and additional transactions. Our customer defaults, we saw the settlement discount pulling through when we entered invoices. We saw that we could change the number of transactions to display and that we want to show fully allocated transactions as well as our sort of outstanding transactions. We also had a little look at our finance charges, and unfortunately that didn't work, but you saw the transactions that would have been generated. I'm not quite sure, like I say, what happened there, so apologies for that. But it's a feature that's available if you do have like one customer that's a particularly bad payer, that you can perhaps incentivize them by charging interest rate on their outstanding debt. Okay, so this is a flavour really. We chose the sales ledger first because it's one of the most straightforward modules. I haven't been how to create a new customer, how to enter a receipt and allocate. That's just standard processing. What we're aiming to achieve is show you the bits of the system that are a little bit different and that maybe you're unaware of. So I'm going to thank you for your time. If you have any questions, as I say, please just type them in through the questions tab, and I will get back to you individually. Our next session will be the end of February, when we'll be going through a similar routine, but for the purchase ledger and having a look at the different payment methods, different remittance options, to give you a flavour of the settings within the purchase ledger. So have a lovely weekend, and I hope I'll speak to you again next month.